Good morning and welcome. This is Business Morning on Channels Television. I'm Chimize Obi Iwagu. We tee off from the global oil market scene as prices fell this morning, adding to losses from the previous session that came as California tightened its pandemic lockdown through Christmas and coronavirus cases continued to surge in the United States and Europe. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 18 cents to $45.58 a barrel, while Brent crude futures fell 24 cents to $48.55 a barrel. Both benchmark contracts lost around 1% on Monday. Globally, a sharp rise in coronavirus cases has led to a string of renewed lockdowns, including strict measures in the U.S. state of California, as well as Germany and South Korea. Government sources in France said the country may have to delay unwinding some lockdown restrictions next week after signs the downward trend in new cases had flattened out after shops were allowed to reopen late last month. Following last week's rally in oil prices on the back of vaccine rollout plans and an agreement by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies, together called OPEC+, to hold back supply increases. Analysts said they were closely watching U.S. lawmakers' efforts to approve a new economic stimulus package. The stimulus will be needed to drive jobs growth and, in turn, energy demand. Data due from the American Petroleum Institute later today and from the U.S. government on Wednesday are expected to show that U.S. crude stocks fell last week, while refined product stockpiles rose. And back here, the first commercial deal under the AfCFTA is set to take place on January 1, 2021, as the African Union member states have agreed on revised instruments, schedules of tariff concessions, and rules of origin. Less than a month before the December 5 deadline for ratification, Nigeria signed up for the ratification of its membership, a move welcomed by the UN Economic Commission for Africa. Now that Nigeria has ratified and the deal is expected to take effect in less than a month, what next? I'm being joined by Nigeria's chief trade negotiator, Victor Lehman. Thank you very much, Mr. Lehman, for joining us on the program. We appreciate it.
Chimese, I hope you're good in Lagos.
I'm very well, as you can see. Anyway, Nigeria ratified its membership in the AfCFTA before the December 5 deadline. Now, yesterday, AU members agreed on revised instruments, schedules of tariff concessions, and rules of origin. So what next?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chimese. First of all, let me say that the step to ratify is historic. But as you may recall, we did not sign the agreement immediately due to Mr. President's deliberate, careful and cautious decision. It turned out that that decision was a very good one because it allowed us to engage. It allowed us to deepen the process of inclusivity, familiarizing stakeholders with the content and the subsequent impact of the agreement. And then after that six geopolitical zone consultations, we then came back and worked furthermore with stakeholders across board. So what you saw a few days ago in regards to the ratification of the AfCFTA was as a result of that deepened, engaged consultation with stakeholders. And so therefore, it is what a lot of stakeholders expected, because at some point they were now the ones saying that we need to ratify. So we've actually done well in Nigeria by making sure that everyone, critical, strategic, relevant stakeholders, understands and engages with the agreement itself. So it's historic, but now the big work begins. It's historic in the sense that the continent was waiting for Nigeria to join. As you know, we are the biggest market, the biggest economy, and of course, in terms of population, we are also the biggest. So the continent was waiting for us. The world was waiting for us to join, and so joining has actually given the expected lifeblood that the AfCFTA needed. And the continent is now ready to trade with Nigeria. Currently, you have 34 countries, including Nigeria, that have ratified, and then 41 tariff offers, the 41 tariff offers that have so far been submitted at the AUC. But, you know, ratification is one step. Taking advantage of the AfCFTA agreement itself is another. That means you need to get the market operators ready. They need to understand how they would start trading on the 1st of January 2021. What would be required of them? They need to understand the implication of the agreement going forward. They need to also understand that the agreement is the first rule-based continental agreement that would provide, or that has provided, a balanced trade relationship across the continent. And that we would play by the rule. That if we play by the rule, we expect economic growth, we expect GDP growth, we expect further deepening domestic engagement, and of course policies as well. We expect job creation. We expect to enhance our welfare gains. We expect to also build capacity on our manufacturers. We expect to build regional global value chains that will create linkages not only within the region or the continental level, but also create linkages into the global market. So it's a lot of work that we need to do. We need to also look at the trade facilitating issues, and we want to make sure that that non-tariff barriers are addressed, because trade facilitation is key. You are looking at making sure the customs is prepared, that the entrenched idea that customs is for revenue generation would now be shifted from revenue generation to making sure that they become the trade facilitator. Because the major part of the success story of the AfCFTA would depend on customs efficiency, would depend on mutual administrative assistance, it would depend on cooperation across the region, ECOWAS region, across the continent, that customs would need to work together in a more integrated manner to ensure that goods across borders freely. And of course, the movement of persons as well. And I also want to look at issues such as transport. You want to look at issues such as policies, issues such as building, ramping up capacity for your MSMEs. In particular, access to finance. That finance is less expensive, and making sure that the repayment, it's to businesses, that you wouldn't tell businesses, I give you a loan today and I have to repay in 6 months or 1 year, and making sure that MSMEs that don't even have the capital to start their business, that you don't ask them for heavy collaterals. There should be a way of underwriting MSMEs access to finance and credit. And that's something I think we need to really work. The big work begins. It's a lot of work. Believe you me, it's enormous. It's not a joke. So in order to take advantage of the AfCFTA, to take advantage of the 1.2 billion market size, and of course the 3.4 trillion GDP, and over 4 trillion expected investment, a lot of work needs to be done. This is just the beginning, I tell you, Chimezie. But let's look at 1, 2 years, 3 years down the road and see what happens with all of this excitement that we have. It's a huge work. At the same time, it's a huge opportunity for Nigeria. But we hope, and we are hopeful and we stay optimistic that this will work. But again, it goes beyond hope and optimism. It actually requires work. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Mr. Lima. Now, having listened to you and looking at all of the things you have reeled out that needs to be done, so it's not just about ratifying, it's about getting ourselves ready to take advantage of what AfCFTA presents to Nigeria. Now, you are the trade facilitator. You've mentioned some of the stakeholders in all of this. You talked about customs. You talked about the MSMEs. Of course, we have the manufacturers and all of that, including the government. So as a facilitator of this, how have you tried to create that synergy to make these people understand the intricacies here, understand some of the things they have to understand about this game, let me call it a game, that we are going to. What have your office done to bring all of these people together to make them understand? You talked about the rules there, and perhaps it's the rule of origin there, which of course is the main issue in this particular matter. What my office has done, as you know, my office was created to coordinate, lead, and manage trade negotiations. In addition to that, we need to also ensure that stakeholders understand the content of the agreements, understands the impact of every negotiated agreement and the negotiated outcomes, that they understand how to engage with every agreement that we negotiate and have been negotiated. And that means we need to ensure that they understand the rules. Let me start with the rules of origin. We're working with stakeholders to know that at the moment we have negotiated and agreed on an 81% rules of origin on HS code digit, 81%. And so now what we then need to do is to sit with stakeholders, all the operators across board, not in Abuja, not in Lagos alone, but across the country, because the country needs to take advantage across board. You know, we have over 200 and something million people in Nigeria, perhaps even more than 200 and something. So then we need to look at our trade volume per capita, trade volume per the population that we have. How many people in Nigeria would actually engage in real trade? I'm not talking about raw materials export. I'm not talking about crude oil export. I'm talking about real trade, semi-manufactured and finished products. How many Nigerians, how many companies in Nigeria would engage with that? So what we need to do is to sit down with them and tell them, this is what we've negotiated. In order for your products to be acceptable as wholly obtained, this you need to do A, B, C, D. You need to ensure that your raw materials, for instance, in the production of chocolate, the raw materials are from Nigeria or they're from any part of Africa, in order to take advantage of the tariff-free arrangement or framework that we have put together under the FCFTA. And we also have to let them know in terms of value addition, the ad valorem principle or the criteria that we have to take into account the value of non-originating material, the VNAM that comes outside of the continent, and how much of that percentage you need in order for it to be accepted. And also have to look at this in terms of wholly originating products. These are the things that you need to do, showing them how to take advantage of the rules of origin that we've put together. What the rules of origin that we've put together would allow us to do if it is strictly adhered to. It will allow us to industrialize. It will allow us to prevent the abuse of our markets by third countries. It will allow us to ensure that people don't just bring, say, suits from outside of the country and just put a button and put a label and say made in Nigeria or made in Cameroon or made in Benin or made in or South Africa. There has to be much more than putting a button on a shirt. There has to be much more than putting just a brand name on a suit. It has to be more than that. A lot has to go in order for that product to qualify to be sold or to benefit from the preferential tariff treatment that we have put together under the FCFTA. And apart from that, you also encourage international investors that want to take advantage of what we have done at the continental level to come in and set up shop. Be it in Nigeria, be it anywhere in Africa, they need to come and set up shop here, not us importing from outside to sell within the FCFTA area. We wouldn't do that, and then we would also work with them to let them understand what it means, standard and quality, specification requirements. This is not only critical or fundamental within the FCFTA market, but it's also important within domestic markets and of course the ECOWAS region, and more so at the global markets.
If you recall, I mean, we've had some of our products rejected in EU. I mean, within the AGUA framework because of quality. So my office is particularly very interested in what MSMEs would do to ensure quality, to ensure standardization. If you are going to produce, say, for instance, the PPEs that are being used, that are being required all over the world now, then we have to look at the specification. We have to look at the width, the length, the thickness, and all of that. You have to make sure that it aligns with global requirement. It aligns with global best practice. So you need to be able to do this going forward, and also need to be able to let them understand that there's a need to move away from informality to formality, or formalization of trade. Not for the purposes of taxation, but for the purposes of government policies, right government policies, and interventions to be made, because without critical, valid, and of course, trust, data that can be trusted, there is no way that government would be able to intervene in a much more efficient and effective way. There has to be that data that government can then use to make decisions, government can then use to make policies, government can then use to make interventions in key, practical, required areas. So that needs to be done. And we also need to be able to work with people at the ports. It's not just the customs. We need to ensure that our ports work. I mean, we utilize up to at least 70% or 80% of our ports capacity. At the moment, we are not utilizing the ports. I'm not sure we're utilizing up to even 40% capacity. We need to also ensure that in terms of trucks and vehicles that carries that transportation is top notch. And we also need to be able to work together to see how we can remove other non-tariff barriers, and of course tariff barriers as well, and technical barriers to trade as well. We need to see how those can be addressed. And I wouldn't say just customs, because in Nigeria there are lots of other components that impede trade rather than enhance trade. For instance, I mean, there was a video I watched. I saw the police stop a truckload of chicken overnight, and they all died. We all need to work with all of these components, all of these operators, for them to understand that every action that they take, if that action is inimical to trade, if that action impedes the ability of traders to be able to trade, those actions would actually impede on the kinds of jobs we want to create. It will impede on the economy. It will impede it will impede on the cost of trade as well. I can see you want to stop me, Chimezie. That's fine.
Absolutely, we really don't. Time is running so fast. I wish we have so much time to talk about this. But before I let you go, we understand that there's been this call for the ratification to go through the National Assembly. Is that correct? And should that be so?
I think we need to understand the process in Nigeria. Ratification is an executive process. It's purely an executive process. Ratification. It's purely at the matter of Mr. President. He takes a division in council with his cabinet. It's purely his. So after the ratification process, what we now need to do is to domesticate the AFCFTA, which is now the legislator. The legislator that has that mandate to domesticate. It will have to go to the National Assembly, to both chambers, both Houses of Reps, and of course the Senate for domestication. But in terms of ratification, it's purely that of the executive, and I think that should be clear to everyone. And that's the way we operate. In some countries it's different. You have to work with the parliament. I know that in South Africa that's different, and I think also in Cameroon and some other countries that you have to go to the parliament for a particular instrument or treaty to be ratified. But in Nigeria, it's a different ballgame entirely. It is purely at Mr. President's prerogative, and of course domestication then moves on to the legislator. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Victor Lehman. I always appreciate your time, and we're always happy having you on the show. Yes, AFCFTA takes off January 1, and I'm going to keep a date with you on this show. I mean, everyone is hearing now
January 2, Mr. Lehman, I'm going to have you on this particular show. We have to talk more about this. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, but I hope you have something to trade on the 1st of January.
Well, we'll talk about that. Deal or no deal?
You better do.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Commodities market update is next. All right, let's talk commodities with Damilola Akimbami, the head of research at Financial Derivatives Company. Good morning, Dami. Good to see you.
Good morning, Chimeze.
Well, I'm sure you were listening to my conversation with Victor Lehman, the trade negotiator. We're talking about the AFCFTA, the takeoff January 1. But then, one issue again there, the border closure.
Yes.
Now, there has been this talk whether or not the border should be reopened. If this remains shut, what happens? What's the implication for this trade deal?
Oh, well, it's unlikely that it will remain short if Nigeria wants to comply or adhere to the rules and regulations of AFTA, because what the African Free Trade Continental Agreement is all about, free trade, movement of goods and services within the continent. So you can't have your border closed if you are going to adhere to this. And we've seen mixed signals from different public officials in the government, some in support of the removal, while others are insisting that the border should remain closed for whatever reason. But the thing is, to an extent, yes, we've seen some gains from the border closure, at least in terms of smuggling and what have you. But then still, look at the larger picture. What does Nigeria stand to benefit from this AFTA agreement? Because now that we've ratified it, Nigeria is the largest African market, so Nigeria stands to benefit from that huge economic size that's going to occur, that trade block that's going to occur from the agreement. Also, the fact that Nigeria is the largest market, you have the market size. A lot of multinationals and all these global organizations would want to open shop in Nigeria and from there sell their goods. So Nigeria stands to benefit from the localization of industries and having the likes of Nestle and other big manufacturing companies establish their factories in the country before they roll out these commodities. And also, the catch there is, while yes, Nigeria stands to benefit from these, we are going to see a reduction in government revenue from tariffs, because another part of the agreement is that there's going to be a reduction in the import tariffs to encourage the free movement of goods and services. So that is a catch which would offset whatever gains the government is going to benefit from the increased market size.
Well, you heard him talk about the fact that I mean, it's not about ratifying. It's about being able to take advantage of whatever opportunity that this deal presents.
Yes.
Now, are you concerned that perhaps Nigeria is not ready, or are we ready? Looking at the situation of things, look at what's happening in the ports. He did mention the ports, and he gave some instances and all that. I mean, you go into the field, you see what is happening. Are you concerned?
I think the major concern right now is that does Nigeria actually have what it takes? Do we have exports? Like if you even look at the Q3 trade report numbers that were released, basically it's just oil that we have as our major export. So to benefit from this, we have to have something that we're selling. So look at the domestic production capacity of the Nigerian economy. It's very low. The manufacturing capacity is also very low. So we need, for us to benefit from it, we have to have the goods that will be competitive and would be able to compete with other international and regional products. But right now, I don't think we have that. And I think that's the major concern a lot of Nigerians, both policy authorities and even investors are concerned about that. Even if Nigeria needs to Nigeria has a lot of opportunities, but what goods are we going to sell? I think that's the major issue, because we don't want, again, that the country would be a dumping ground, because there's going to be intense competition, definitely. And if your goods can't compete with the goods that are being traded, then you're going to see the shift to other countries' commodities, and I think that is a major concern. The issue of port also, definitely, we know that if you look at the Apapa, the gridlock, the amount of traffic it has caused, it has affected supply chain disruptions. These are other issues that need to be addressed, because if you are trying to grow your trade sector, you have to also improve the logistics chain of it.
You're talking about competitiveness here, and you did mention oil commodity, which of course is about what where we gain our foreign exchange. Yeah, we've seen the new lockdowns in various areas, and that is having some kind of impact on the oil, outweighing even the vaccine news. Last week, OPEC Plus took a decision on what they have to do come January. So how do you see this scenario playing out eventually even into the new year, and even as we sign up, or if this AFCTA takes effect, and then we are having oil as our only commodity for foreign exchange? What's
so
the implication of all of this scenario playing out in the global oil market now for Nigeria?
So right now, the next 3 months are very critical for oil prices. And by that, I mean, one, because by January, OPEC Plus, based on the agreement they made recently, they're going to increase supply by 500,000 barrels per day. Also, Iran has started installing or preparing installation for production because it's anticipating that the sanctions, the U.S. sanctions, are going to be eased. And so that's going to occur in the next 3 months. We know that Libya is still ramping up its production, so obviously that increase in supply. So all these fundamentals are still in favor of an oversupplied market. And the only other factors that could counter that from the demand side, we're seeing, yes, there's a recovery in Asian fuel demand, and we can see that China, which is the second largest oil consumer, is also reporting improved, a very significant trade surplus. So we can see that there's a recovery in China. The demand is picking up. Even the Purchasing Managers Index increased for the 9th consecutive month. So yes, we are seeing demand slowly pick up. There's news also of the vaccine distribution, the rollout in the UK, and possibly maybe in the US in the next couple of months. So these are some of the factors that could limit to an extent the impact, the present impact of this supply factor. So that's why I said these next 3 months are going to be critical. So by January, February, even up to March, we're going to know, obviously, by how much the vaccines have been distributed, how widely spread they've been distributed, if the spike in countries like the US, UK, Germany, if the spike has eased or if it's even spreading to other countries. So because these factors will determine the dynamics of oil prices. But in the short term, between now and then, by the end of Q1 2021, we feel oil prices will continue to trade around $48, $49 per barrel. And for Nigeria, it's our major export. It accounts for 81% of our total exports, at least as at Q3. That's where we get most of our forex receipts from also. So definitely, the oil price dynamics will affect Nigeria. And if by January, when more clarity is shared about how OPEC Plus is going to administer the ease in output cuts, and Nigeria, for instance, gets a relaxation of its output quota, then we can produce more. We can actually benefit and leverage on that increase in production to offset lower prices.
Okay, let's look at agri-export. Cocoa, for instance, is Nigeria's major agri-commodity export. And, of course, we've seen Ghana election. Ghana is also a great producer of cocoa. And your slide says, incumbent expected to win positive for cocoa market. Now, with the border still closed, how will that, I mean, we have cocoa as one of our major agri-export, and then we're having this border closure, and then we're having Ghana, just by the neighboring country there, great producer of cocoa, and then we have this AFCTA. How will this play out?
So unfortunately, Nigeria is not a major cocoa player or cocoa producer. And cocoa, if you look at our non-oil export, cocoa is about 3rd or 4th largest non-oil export for Nigeria. In Q3, we just produced about 12 billion naira worth of cocoa, and in terms of tons, that's about 250,000 tons. So we don't really impact or play that much impact on prices globally. And what is happening in Ghana, the elections held yesterday, and the 2 participants are familiar faces, John Mahama and the incumbent Nana Akufo-Addo. Although it's likely that the incumbent is going to win, And that is good for policy continuity because obviously we expect the ongoing policies to continue. And that's positive for cocoa prices. Ghana is the second largest producer of cocoa. And what we're seeing right now that is playing out in the global cocoa market is that cocoa prices have been increasing. And that's because of the price war between Ivory Coast and Ghana and the US-American chocolate companies, Hershey's and Mars. And they've been having this issue over the living income differential, which is actually targeted at improving the livelihood of farmers, addressing issues of child labor and deforestation. But now that to an extent it seems like the COPEC, that is like the cocoa cartel, they've come to terms with Hershey's and Mars. So we should see cocoa prices stabilize. And for Nigeria, yes, we produce cocoa, but like I mentioned...
Well, that price war, is it possible that Nigeria can actually take advantage of it to,
that's what I was just about to say, that we can't take advantage of it, but again, how much are we producing? We're not producing enough. And again, the currency has been devalued. Typically, when your currency weakens, it makes your exports more competitive. So you see like countries like China have actually adopted that as a strategy where they devalue their currency so that their exports can become cheaper and they can sell more. But again, Nigeria doesn't have that much exports. Cocoa, we don't produce that much. We're not that competitive. So yes, it would definitely impact positively on our trade balance, which has the deficit has widened significantly. This is the highest level in 3 years. So we need all the help we can get. And bear in mind that this is the cocoa producing season, the cocoa harvest season in Nigeria. So now that we're in the harvest season, we're producing, we should be able to take advantage of the price increase in the global market.
Okay, let's look at wheat. Wheat futures down 0.74%, and you say lower global wheat is positive for domestic price of flour. So are we likely to see the price of bread come down, even though I'm not a fan of bread?
Well, it's unlikely. Yes, global wheat prices have come down because, or are likely to decline because Canada's output is projected to increase to a 7-year high. But now, what is happening in the domestic flour market? The major factor there is the exchange rate again. So because we import this commodity, so fine, wheat prices are falling, but then the exchange rate has weakened significantly, so our import bill has increased. Not only has the currency been adjusted, the forex is not even available, so most manufacturers are actually adopting a blended rate of the power market and the investor-exporter window. So fine, to an extent, the price decline globally may limit how much price increase we're going to see in the price of flour, but then still, it's still very expensive. Right now, a bag of flour costs about 13,500, and it's likely to increase in the next couple of weeks because of these forex restrictions and rationing and the impact on commodity prices. And what you're going to see for commodities that, commodities such as bread, you might still, what you see is that your loaf of bread might actually become lighter because, again, manufacturers have to weigh the options of, do I pass on the full cost to consumers, bearing in mind that the consumer disposable income has also fallen. So consumers are not going to be demanding as much. So what they're most likely going to do is maybe reduce the quantity so you have a lighter loaf of bread, basically.
Talking about the foreign exchange market, yes, Naira is still having a free fall kind of in the parallel market, and this is despite the new rule, this diaspora or remittances, which is supposed to, of course, bring
forex,
bring liquidity. But do you think that is really having much impact?
Oh, well, what we're seeing right now in the forex market, it seems like there's a lot of policy ambiguity. The CBN had initially come out to state that, oh no, we're restricting diaspora remittances, and now it has retraced its steps. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And to an extent, yes, it's supposed to boost liquidity. But again, that is still, there's that trust deficit right now. Investors are looking at the markets, are looking at policy authorities. What signal are you sending? So there's that trust deficit. And also in terms of the fact that our oil receipts are dropping. So even if remittances, now you can send your remittance and receive it in dollars. Again, the people that are sending this money, we know that unemployment in a lot of global economies have risen because of the COVID effect. So it's still going to play a major issue. And then there's that anticipation that the currency is still going to be adjusted. We know that at the investor and exporter window, we've seen the exchange rate move from 360 to 380, now to 390, 395. So there's expectation that the CBN would unofficially move the official rate towards that figure, and we might see a convergence around 390, 400. So a lot of speculative activities still going on in the forex market.
Okay, Dami, we'll leave it at that. We still have Thursday to talk more because
Yes.
Christmas is coming.
Yes.
And a lot of food commodities seem to be skyrocketing. Now they say commodity like onion seem to be the gold of
Yes.
today. But
Yes.
this is not a topic for today.
Thursday
We'll talk
then.
about that. On Thursday is always a pleasure to have you
Thank you.
on the show. We'll be back in a moment.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
Okay, it's time to talk the market, and Eddie is on board. Eddie, I told you yesterday, I missed you, and I still miss you. I'm happy to have you back.
It's good to be back, Jimmy. Well, unfortunately, I'm back now, and then the market began the week on a negative note, and that was due to investors
It's
selling
okay.
off.
That's the dynamism in the market, and that's what makes it what it is, you know.
So yesterday's decline was due to investors selling off in shares like ETI, Nigerian Breweries, and Zenith Bank. You know, the All-Share Index was down 0.21% at 35,064.36 points. Now, the month-to-date gain is reduced to about 0.1%, while the year-to-date gain is at 30.6%. We saw the equity cap at 18.326 trillion naira. Activity level was mostly negative yesterday. However, volume rose by about 10% to 324.32 million units, worth 3.191 billion naira, all traded in 4,108 deals. Now, sectoral performance was mostly negative, with the banking, consumer, and industrial goods down. But let's talk to Rotimi Fakaejo, a stockbroker, for more on this. Good morning, Mr. Fakaejo. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, it's my pleasure.
Before I get your thoughts on the trading day and your expectations for today, Seplat is caught in the middle between the imbroglio between Access Bank and Cardinal Drilling Services. Now, is this situation likely to affect the stocks of Access Bank or Seplat, which is at the receiving end?
Well, for my findings and understanding of the matter at hand, it is evident through what we can see that Seplat and Cardinal Drilling Services have common shareholders. And one of such is ABC or Jaco. And I believe it's on the strength of that Access Bank is co-opting Seplat in this, because they know fully well that the rigging service being provided by Cardinal is a mainstay of the business of Seplat. So if they take over that asset and they start by enforcement on the headquarters of Seplat, I think they believe they can have a leeway. For them to have gotten that injunction, it means that they have a good stand with respect to this. However, looking at the whole lot of this, I believe it's going to have more impact on the share price of Seplat, if at all, more than that of Access Bank, because Access is on the recovery path from Cardinal's drill services. And as such, I believe strongly that it's going to be a plus for them should they succeed in actually getting away with what has happened. So for me, it is a plus for Access, and whoever may have a mind will definitely be Seplat at the end of the day, if at all that is sought. So I think going forward, investors in Access Bank need not worry about this, because this is an inherited asset from Diamond Bank PLC, which submerged into Access Bank. So I believe in all of these, investors in Access Bank don't really have much to worry about for now, until the facts are more clearer as you go.
All right, Mr. Fakaejo, thank you so much for your input on the program. Rotimi Fakaejo is a stockbroker. Well, Chimi, we'll have to take a break now and we'll come back to review the markets.
The people in the UK are set to receive a coronavirus vaccine today. Juliana joins us from London. Hello, Juliana. Good morning. Good to see you. I hope you enjoyed your short time out.
Good morning, Chimeze. Yes, I'm back. I did enjoy my short breakaway. I'm happy to be back with the team, though, of course.
And we're happy to have you back. Well, it's the V-Day. That's what it's called, as a mass vaccination program begins today. How has the day started off? Are people watching with optimism or kids' gloves? And are you getting a shot today?
I won't be getting a shot in my arm today. I'm very much down in the list of priorities, but I've got to tell you, it has been a very emotional day in Britain as they've started to roll out what will be the biggest mass vaccination in the history of Britain. Matt Hancock, the health secretary, was actually crying on Sky News. And we do have a test patient, Margaret Keenan. She is 90 years old. She'll be 91 next week. She has become the first person in the world to receive a vaccination from a proven COVID-19 jab, and it's been absolutely phenomenal. Thousands of people across Britain will be receiving it. There are over 50 sites where 800,000 of these Pfizer BioNTech jabs will be. 800,000 is enough to administer to 400,000 people before the end of December. Over 1 million people would have received it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And this could potentially spell the beginning of the end of COVID, which of course has killed over 50,000 people here in Britain. A lot of people are skeptical, of course. I know even today on Twitter, some people are saying they're not going to have the jab, they're scared of the jab. But if you actually come to think of it, and the fact that over 1 million people have died, you know, the fact that there now is science, innovation, governance, the army, a rollout, trying to improve lives, trying to get us to some sort of normality and stability is just completely out of this world. And of course, Britain is so happy to be flying the flag, to be the first country in the world to start this mass inoculation. As you can imagine, British media are literally camped from wall to wall outside all of these hospitals. All of the big MPs, the ministers, scientists, Pfizer, BioNTech have also been given interviews across the media. It's absolutely amazing. So yes, just to reaffirm, Margaret Keenan, 90-year-old grandmother in Coventry, is the first person in the world to get an approved COVID jab. And I think that happened at 6:30 a.m. local time this morning.
Interesting. Well, we'll see how that goes. It's a continuous theme. Okay, while UK is dealing with COVID-19, it's also dealing with Brexit. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will travel to Brussels this week to meet European Commission President in a last-ditch effort to salvage a post-Brexit trade deal. Are there hopes for a breakthrough?
Well, there are hopes for a breakthrough, but it's just such a difficult discussion because the signals keep changing from both sides. Both sides still are reiterating that they want to get a deal. But, you know, we're a couple of weeks away from the end of the transition period. So it's either going to be a hard Brexit or, you know, we come crashing out without a deal. I believe Ursula von der Leyen and Boris Johnson did have a phone conversation yesterday. They both came away from the phone conversation saying it is still going to be difficult. The same three sticking points that I've been discussing with you over the past couple of months still remain, and that's fisheries, it's a state-level playing field, and governance. They still haven't got their heads around it. And of course, Boris Johnson has been speaking to British media because of the Pfizer vaccine. A lot of them have been asking about Brexit, and he is now saying that it is looking increasingly difficult. Michel Barnier, Lord David Frost, both negotiators from both sides have been crossing the English Channel over the past couple of weeks, but that sticking point still does remain. It is looking increasingly unlikely, and this is going to be of huge concern for Boris Johnson. The latest polls are suggesting that even the hardline Brexiteers, if they were to take a referendum again today and decide whether or not they wanted to stay in the EU, the majority of them would say they would want to stay. Many of them are regretting this EU referendum vote. They've been crippled economically and financially because of COVID-19. To think that in a couple couple of weeks we're going to have another economic failure just after we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel for COVID is not great, and it's certainly not going to be great for Boris Johnson and this populist Prime Minister in the approval ratings.
And in corporate news, hope seems to be coming the way of Debenhams as Mike Ashley's Frasers Group is in talks to buy the 240-year-old department store, buy it off administration. Will these deals kill through? If not, Debenhams will be wound down after Christmas.
Debenhams will be wound down after Christmas. It's looking increasingly unlikely that Mike Ashley and the Fraser Group will be able to save the business in time. Actually, Mike Ashley does have history with Debenhams. He was the biggest shareholder until about a year ago when they kind of forcibly removed those shares from him. But if Debenhams does go, the fact that they've already lost 5,000 jobs and then there'll be another 12,000 to go, this will be the biggest corporate hit for COVID-19 in Britain. They are expecting it to be wound down. Mike Ashley has put in this last-minute bid, but whether or not it can be saved in such a short amount of time does remain unlikely. There is a statement here. It says, whilst Fraser's Group hopes that a rescue package can be put in place and jobs saved, time is short and the position is further complicated by the recent administration of the Arcadia Group. Chancellor Rishi Sunak has already talked about viable jobs and viable jobs being saved. There are questions being raised as to whether or not Debenhams should be saved. As you said, it's a 242-year-old company. E-commerce is booming. Perhaps the demise of Debenhams, which would, of course, be so sadly, is just, speeding up what would have already been the inevitable, Chimmy.
All right, Juliana. BC will talk to you later in the day on Basing. Enjoy your day while you wait for Basing. Okay, back here. Debt and currency market, again with Eddie.
Thank you, Jimmy. Well, it looks like those negative sentiments also spilled into the bond market yesterday. As the market closed negative, we saw yields increasing by about 11 basis points at the short and the mid end, while the long end of the curve was unchanged. We saw 5 deals on the bond market worth 2.20 billion naira. But to talk more about that segment of the market is Ramat Baba, the chief dealer at fixed income at FBN Quest Merchant Bank. Good morning, Ramat. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
Yes, yesterday the DMO issued a circular on the FGN savings bond for December. Now, that offer began yesterday and it would be closing on the 11th of December. Can you tell us more about this, the offer, what are the stop rates, and when is the settlement for this?
Okay, so the federal government issued a circular. The settlement is on the 16th of December, and there are 2 maturities on offer, the 2-year bond and the 3-year maturity. The 2-year bond, of course, matures in 2022, and it's offered at 1.32%. That's the yield on it, while the 3-year bond is offered at 1.82%. Of course, as expected, this is more for the retail segment, but the truth of the matter is we might be seeing more of HNIs and more higher volume bidders going into the market, just for the simple reason that the regular FGN bond auction, at the regular FGN bond auction, you don't have the very short tenure offered. And also the market, the secondary market is currently trading at about these levels for those maturities. Well, not these exact maturities, they're not, but of course we have 2022 and 2023 maturities, and they are currently being traded around these levels at about 1.5, 1.3% levels. So we might be seeing a bit more appetite in the savings bond market.
All right, Ramat. So yesterday, the Treasury bills market closed flat. As you could see, we had just 3 deals on 1 bill on that counter. Given the low yield environment in the Nigerian Treasury bills market, what do you expect, or what should we be seeing from demand in that segment?
We actually expect this to be the norm for now. Market sentiment it's really been more of buy sentiment in the market. But of course, that has been a bit stalled with the recent CBN circulars that came out last week. And also not forgetting that we're expecting banks to be credited with the CBN special bills. That's the bills coming in to replace the CRR. Banks are supposed to get CRR refunds, but they'll be getting them as treasury bills from the CBN. Market expected that to happen last week around Friday, but right now people are expecting that to happen any moment from now. So that's really going to be the major driver in the market for the next couple of weeks. Once that is done, we'll have a clearer picture of market direction.
All right, Rama, thank you for your input on the program. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Ramat Baba is the chief dealer of fixed income at FBN Quest Merchant Bank. Well, Chimi, it looks like this is the new norm for the Nigerian treasury bills markets. We'll just have to wait and see what happens going forward.
Absolutely, but I'm more interested in what is happening at the equities market, and believe me, I'm very optimistic that market is going to close bullish for the year. Let's market. Okay, that's a wrap on the program. I'm Chimize Obi Iwago.